Hey guys, I decided to try something different and have my face in with the notes in hopes that it will help you understand the content a little bit more. So give me your feedback and let me know what you think at the end of the video, okay? So we have just talked about food chains and food webs. So we're going to move on and look at how energy moves between those levels and how photosynthesis ties into this whole thing, okay? All right. So let's look at these pyramids right here. Now, you guys are really familiar with the pyramid of energy, and I think in the first set of notes, the video that I posted, I talked about this, but that was for my AP class. So I'm just going to go over it really quickly with you guys. So the pyramid of energy is basically showing how energy moves between different trophic levels. And energy is lost as it progresses up the food chain. So the pyramid of energy, it shows the flow of energy. So let's write the definition for this. I'm going to move this up. All right. Right here. All right. So this shows the flow of energy. Okay. And what's important to know is this can change with the seasons. Right now, we are getting ready to enter into winter, so that's going to impact, at the very least, the producers, because a lot of our trees are going to be losing their leaves. So it can change with the seasons. Okay. Now, when we look at the energy of pyramid, we use what's called the 10% rule. That's a 10, not a 6. The 10% rule. Okay. What this states is that 10% of the available energy is what's transferred to the next trophic level. And you're going to have to be able to work some very simple problems in calculating this. And guys, it's super easy. It's nothing like the population math, okay? So, first of all, we know that energy is going to be measured in joules, meters squared per year, okay? You can also see it sometimes they'll use grams per meter squared per year as well, okay? Usually it's going to be in joules. All right, so let's say, for example, at our producer level, okay, that's always at the bottom, let's say there are 1 million joules of energy at the producer level. So our next level up is going to be the primary consumers. Okay, just think back to that food chain. So when the primary consumers eat the producer, it only gets 10% of that 1 million. So what's 10% of a million? Well, you don't need a calculator to figure this out, guys. All you do is you knock off a 0 at the end. So look, if we knock off that 0, that leaves us with 100,000 joules. Okay? So then when the primary consumers get eaten by the secondary consumers, guess what? That's another 10% loss. Just like right here. Okay? So what is this? Guess what? We knock off another 0. That leaves us with 10,000 joules. And then when we get up to our tertiary consumer, that's another 10% loss. So then we have 1,000 joules. Okay? Pretty simple. And if they give you numbers with a decimal point, all you have to do, guys, is move the decimal. You don't need a calculator for this. All right, so let's go back to this first one right here. Now, this is called an inverted pyramid because it is smallest at the bottom. So what this is showing you is that this is a producer level, and this kind of is counterintuitive. Like, when I first looked at this, it didn't make sense to me. Like, there's supposed to be more producers than anything else. Well, yes, and in this case there still is. But there is one extremely large producer. So it could be a very large tree, and that is what is supporting the food chain itself. Okay? So this means that there is one large producer. But it has enough resources to keep the food chain stable. Okay? So the pyramid of numbers shows the number of organisms at each trophic level. Okay, simple. All right, the next one is the pyramid of biomass. Now this looks more like a traditional pyramid, but what biomass is, it is organic material that we can actually measure how much is there. So it is organic material that is used for energy. Okay, organic material that is used for energy. So what this is showing us is the biomass at each trophic level. So when you look at this, let's say they had this picture on the IB test, and they asked you which trophic level has the largest biomass, you would say producers. Okay? All right. So let's move down here. Okay, now what is important that we understand is when we're talking about the whole food web concept, we also have to factor in photosynthesis, because photosynthesis supports the producers. It's what allows the producers to be alive, essentially. If you think back to biology, they have to do photosynthesis in order to survive. They make their own food. We can actually calculate how much of that energy is available to support the food chain. So that's when we look at Gpp and Npp. Okay, so we have, and I'm going to get my highlighter tool so that we can highlight this. Okay, gross primary productivity is Gpp, and net primary productivity is Npp. Okay, I'm going to give you an easy way to remember this. All right, so let's look at the definition first. So the gross primary productivity is the rate. It's the rate of photosynthesis. Okay, simple. The rate of photosynthesis. The net primary productivity is what is left after respiration losses. Now, you may not remember this from freshman biology, but photosynthesis and cellular respiration are directly linked to each other. So, before I go any further into Gpp and Npp, I want to talk about this image right here. So, photosynthesis and cellular respiration are directly linked. Now, in photosynthesis, we're obviously using the sun, okay? Remember, photosynthesis is the chemical conversion of light energy, okay? We're converting light energy into chemical energy. Let's just write that down in case we don't remember. So it is the conversion of light energy to chemical energy. Now, what is that chemical energy called? Glucose. Okay? The whole point of photosynthesis is to produce glucose. So glucose is used by the plant itself for growth and structure. And when we eat plants, when animals eat plants, we use that glucose as a fuel source. Okay? So in photosynthesis, it absorbs carbon dioxide and it releases oxygen. Now, where does that oxygen go? The oxygen comes down to animals. We take it in. We also use the glucose for energy. Now, what do we release? Carbon dioxide. Guess who uses the carbon dioxide? You're right, plants. So these two processes are very dependent on each other. So what's important that you need to remember are the inputs and outputs for each one. So for photosynthesis, the inputs, what goes into photosynthesis, is going to be carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. That's what goes in. Now, what are the outputs? Let's just change the color. What are the outputs? Oxygen and glucose, C6H12O6. All right. So let's look down here at respiration. So cellular respiration, this is what happens. Energy is released into organisms through consumption. All right, so let's go ahead and write this down. So it releases energy to organisms, but is ultimately lost as heat. Okay, so let's think back to the food chain that we went over in the very beginning, and I drilled our arrows. When it goes from each trophic level, most of that energy is lost as heat. So if we look back up here in our pyramid, okay, like here, 10% goes to each level. Well, where does that 90% go? The 90% is what's lost as heat. Okay. All right, so now that we know the connection between photosynthesis and respiration, let's look at Gpp and Npp again. All right, so what is happening here is the conversion of energy into biomass. Remember, we just talked about biomass. It is the amount of organic matter. Okay, and what this equals is productivity. So you have gross primary productivity, net primary productivity. What does productivity actually refer to? It refers to photosynthesis. So we can measure how much of this is occurring in an ecosystem. Okay, so gross versus net. The way that we look at this is, think about your paycheck. If you have a job, when you get your paycheck, do you get all of that money? No, you don't. You lose some of it to taxes. So we can kind of look at this in the same lens. So the gross primary productivity is the total. That is what you could potentially get if they were not taking out taxes. So that is all of the energy within an ecosystem. Now with net primary productivity, we have to take into respiration. Okay, so that is the impact of animals when we consume those producers. So the net is going to be the taxes taken out, essentially. So net primary productivity, NPP, is equal to the gross primary productivity minus the rate of respiration. So in the next video, we're going to be looking at this a little bit more in detail.